Dr. Joe Borio, and welcome to Chiropassion Consulting. What percentage of your practice is children? So welcome tonight. We're going to spend no more than maybe a half hour. We're going to talk about some different ways to evaluate your practice and to assess, I think, what level of your practice is on track towards wellness or principled care. And one great way to do that is to assess the percentage of your practice in regards to rendering care and checking children or babies. So I think that's really important. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how to evaluate that, how to assess that. I also want to give you some great ideas on how to bring more children into your practice. You often have a lot of people coming in, and many of those people have children. They have children under their influence. They may be an aunt or an uncle. They might be a grandparent. And as a result, they have a lot of influence on bringing children in your practice. So really how to get them to be, if you will, soldiers for the chiropractic principle so that they can get out there and spread the message. It really is a mission in an effort to help people understand what it is we do as chiropractors and more importantly, what they need to do to stay healthy. Not just telling the story of us, and I think sometimes we get lost in that everyone's trying to tell the story. Okay, but if I tell the story of this person who comes into your office and was blind and now they see, I'm not saying that's not awesome, but the reality is the average American says, well, that's cool, that's interesting, I totally buy into all the validity of what you just said, but I see totally fine, so I don't see value in what it is that you're talking about. But if you can talk about why they need care, what they have, what they own, and how best to take care of it, then you explain to them, hey, this is what I do as a chiropractor, this is my role in taking care of you, and they understand why they need to be taken care of and what part of their body needs to be taken care of that you take care of. Now we can start to have a conversation, and then the story basically supports the need of rendering care to the nervous system, as opposed to, hey, I treated this guy with this and he got better. Most people don't relate to it unless they have a blind uncle, who had the same problem. And the reality is everybody that's blind that gets care doesn't get their eyesight back. It doesn't mean they're not healthier by removing the subluxation. So that's what I mean. It starts to muck the soup, if you will. It starts to make the water muddy. And people don't understand what the heck we do. They don't understand what it is an adjustment does. How does cracking your back have any effect on anything? And we've gotten lost in that. So a great way to measure, going back to what I initially said, a great way to measure your practice in its level of principle, not the only way, is to assess the percentage of children that you care for in your practice. So we're going to go through that here over the next few minutes. I do want to let you know we do have an upcoming event on May 3rd and 4th in my practice. So in my practice in Cicero, New York, we're going to have an event that is going to be awesome. It's a 2-day event. We're going to bring in Dr. Shane Walker, who's the president of the IFCO, who's a good friend of mine. I sit with him on the board at Sherman, but he's also going to present as well. And there's nobody that's more fired up on the clarity of what chiropractic has to bring to the world than Dr. Shane Walker. So real excited and very honored to have him there. So that's important. And I want to let you guys know that at the end of this night that we're spending together here over the next 30 minutes, I want to offer everybody an incentive to get to one of our events, specifically Syracuse. And there's one thing I want to say. I mean, without bragging or without trying to impress you, I want to be really clear that when I make comments about what we've been able to do in our practice, I use that to rather impress upon you that what we do is awesome. And in the day, if you will, not a few years ago before I started traveling around, I'm not in the practice nearly as much as I used to, but when the practice was the main focus of chiropractic for me in that building, I was adjusting over 600 people in a day, not in a week, not in a month. I would literally myself physically adjust over 600 people in one day. And we did that for years. And that's some things that only a handful of people have done since the beginning of chiropractic in our modern day. And we've seen more people in a week than just about, not necessarily the highest, but just about anybody that's ever practiced chiropractic. We've seen more children and adjusted more babies than just about anybody in the history of this profession. And I still practice. So what I tell you to do, or better said, what I direct you to do, my advice to you, is something that I still do and I hold sacred. I honor those principles and procedures because I know how effective they are, and I know how big our mission is, and I know how big our purpose is. My mission has grown beyond the roof of that practice. So I travel all over the world now trying to help other chiropractors. But I still love to get in the office and adjust people. And what I teach you, what I share with you every day is what I'm still doing. I'm still doing it. So you guys have an opportunity to go to events, and some of them are great shows, and they put on a big show, and they put on great entertainment, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and that's great. But you also have an opportunity to spend a weekend with a man that has done it better than just about anybody that's ever walked in chiropractic. And you also have the opportunity to spend a weekend with a man who's more focused and dedicated to chiropractic than just about anybody that walks the planet. And you also have the opportunity to spend the weekend with somebody who is still in the game. And I'm not telling you something I used to do 20 years ago. I'm telling you something I did Thursday before I left to practice at 6:30. I'm telling you exactly what I do. So my procedures protocols are the best, most efficient procedures you could ever implement in your practice. And my ability to communicate effectively towards the value and benefit of chiropractic allowed me to see so many people and still maintain value and worth of the nervous system, understanding and conveying that importance of the nervous system better than just about anybody. So again, I don't say that to say, rah, rah, I'm great. I'm saying that to express to you and impress upon you the value of being at my office and getting to walk in a building that has seen so many people, and you really get a sense of what it is we do and why we do it and how dedicated we are and how effective what we do really is. And you get to train with me. Certainly anybody that listens to what we have to offer, most of the practices I go into, man or woman, most people are lying to themselves about the percentage of children that they see. It's more of a feeling. It's so powerful when you adjust a baby, an infant, that it almost overtakes you, and when you leave that day or that month, that's what stays with you, and you're like, wow, I see a lot of babies, I see a lot of kids in my practice. In reality, most people don't see hardly any babies or children in their practice. So a practice that is starting to move towards principle should be a minimum of 10% of their patient base as babies or children. Children being, that 16, 14-year-old or less. That's really where we should be. And I'm not trying to beat you up when I say this, and I'm not trying to say you're a bad chiropractor or you're not living up to your potential if that's not what you're doing, because most chiropractors are very hard workers and they want nothing more than to serve people with what we do as chiropractors. So it's sometimes tough to take criticism. Sometimes it's tough to learn something new because you're like, well, God, I'm working so hard already. For you to tell me that, it hurts. So I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to open up that mindset a little bit. We have to get some awareness and recognize that there's some deficiencies in what you do, that what you're doing is awesome, the level of work and commitment, but there's better ways to do it. Let's not reinvent the wheel, for God's sakes, right? Because listen, it's not you that's at stake, it's all the people that you're not serving with chiropractic care. So not inventing the wheel, I know it takes a hit on your ego if you don't want to listen to somebody else's YouTube video on how to invent a wheel. I get that, but the reality is it's all the people you're not serving that are really the victims of you not doing it as well as you can. So we got to look at the percentage of kids. So real easy, what I want you to do is go back the last 4 weeks and then skip 2 or 3 months and go back 3 or 4 months before that, and then skip a few and go back 3 or 4 months before that. And I want you to count on that day sheet how many children came in versus how many people you saw. So if you adjusted 100 people that day, count how many of them were children. And you're going to do that, like I said, for a few days. And the reality is, the majority of people that do that, you're going to find a very small percentage. Most practices are 1% or less where they're adjusting children. Now, why is that a great reflection of principle? Well, I'll tell you. Most people aren't bringing in their infant or their child because they have sciatica. And, you know, when is the last time you did a straight leg raise on an infant? You know, and some people laugh, but the reality is, you know, we're not doing cervical compression and Kemp's and Bechterews and Lesagues and all those orthopedic tests we were taught in school on babies and on kids. And the reason being is because most kids aren't coming in because they have an orthopedic musculoskeletal type problem. You're adjusting a child to open them up. Now, that's one way to look at it. I'm going to be a little bit harsher. If you are somebody that kind of sticks your chest out and says, hey, listen, I'm close to 10%, or I'm a little bit higher than 10%, Dr. Joe, no problem. Let's take a look at that group then and find out how many of those children, okay, that you're adjusting are asymptomatic. Because when I talk about 10% of your practice, I'm not saying that 10% has to have autism. I don't want them to have, I'm not saying they can't, but I'm not saying I want them to have ear infections or sinus trouble or digestive problems or bedwetting. I'm not talking about that. I'm asking you, what's the percentage of your practice that's walking through your door, that's bringing in children, that bringing them in for one reason and one reason only, to get their spine adjusted and corrected to allow their body to communicate better? That's the 10% that I'm talking about. What's the percentage of your practice of children that are truly coming in for wellness care? And when you can start to say, hey, listen, you know what, 10% of my day is easily coming in with babies and children for no other reason than just to come in and get adjusted, now we're talking about something. Now we're talking about actually practicing principal chiropractic care. And how do you get to that is the question. You know, how do you step back and say, okay, well, Dr. Joe, that's great. You're like one of those other critics. You're one of these people that are identifying problems. I am not a critic. I'm a solution man. I'm somebody that likes to look at situations in somebody's practice, and I like to offer solutions. I like to look at a problem and find a way to solve it. And one of the ways, very easy to solve a deficient child practice is, do you talk about care for kids? I mean, it's amazing that we often will talk about innate and universal, or we maybe don't even use those words in our practice, but we're talking about subluxation and we're doing the nervous system and talking about how important it is. But then the question is, do you relate that to children? You know, do you ask, and this is a critical question, and it's a silly question, and it was taught to me by my mentors. When they call on that first visit, do you ask, is this appointment for you or your entire family? That is a phenomenal question. Most people think that's a silly question when I talk to chiropractors, especially, you know, new people coming out of school or the person who's been in practice a long time. Listen, no, you know, it's rare that somebody says, even in our practice, it's rare that somebody says, wow, no, but I'm going to bring all my kids in after you said that. Or it's rare that somebody says, yeah, no, this appointment's for me and everybody in my family. It happens, but it's not frequent, unfortunately, right? So the reality is, by asking that question, what it is, it's planting a seed. It's letting them know. It's cracking their mind open just a little bit that says, hey, listen, we work for families. We work to serve families with what we do. Because most people are thinking, well, I'll go for my backache or a headache or a neck ache, and I would never think about bringing my kids in for a back or a neck ache. But, hey, maybe it's a good idea. I mean, something's going to start to fire in their mind about what it is you do as a chiropractor. That's number one. Number two, you got to teach them about what subluxation is. And when they walk in, think about this now. You walk into your practice, you've never been there before. How most people feel is anxious. You know, think about if I called you up and I said, hey, Barbara, listen, you and your husband, if you guys could come on over, we're having a big party over at this house. It's a friend of mine's. I'd love for you guys to be there. And you're like, oh my God, that's great. Well, Barbara's husband, Bill, can't get out of work right away. And Barbara, you're thinking, or Bill, you're thinking that I'm going to be there. So now you walk into a house that you've never been to before, in a room full of people that you know no one. And you're walking in, and most of us feel a little bit like, whew, what am I getting myself into? What am I walking in as far as a level of comfort? That's not a comfortable zone for most people. That's why you go get the liquid courage, as they say. You walk up to the bar is usually the first place that most people go. But that's the reality. You got somebody walking into a party at your office. They know no one. They know nothing about chiropractic. They're often hurting or not feeling really well. Most of them are sick. They've been subluxated for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So their neurologic network isn't even connected. So they're not even functioning as well as they're supposed to anyway. They walk into your practice and we're wondering, what the big challenge is. So you got to warm welcome and greet them when they walk in. But when they walk in, what's their experience in the sense of them in your office as in considering how they would feel about bringing a child in there? So what do you have around there that would say, geez, I'm walking in and yet, this office is about kids too. Do you have anything in there? I can tell you almost any practice I've been to has nothing to do with children. What do? Is they go to the store, Toys R Us, and they buy one of those plastic tables or plastic picnic tables. Everybody knows them. They're usually the primary colors, right? They're red, yellow, and blue, I believe, and they're stuck over there in the corner, and they put some books and they put some toys, and it's an area that's vacuumed around and often cleaned around. It usually gets kind of dirty. It's got the tea set or whatever, and that's, if you will, the extent of most practices with children. Let me tell you something. That's playing so pathetically small, it's almost not even worth putting that there. The reality is, think about this. When you walk in as a child and you're 5, 6, 8 years old, what are you looking at? One of the great little tools I always tell clients is, when it's talk about kids, get on your knees and walk around your practice, because in general, what you see is what a child sees. Do they feel welcome? Is it outlets and just bare walls? Or do you have cartoons? Do you have kinesthetic items that are stuck to the wall that they can play with? What about even on your front door? Think about that. A glass front door or a solid front door, when you open the door, do you have anything down low so when a child's walking into your practice, they can actually see something kind of fun or funky or something kind of neat to look at? Something that says, hey, listen, you matter, you count. Something that says, hey, let's engage with you in my practice. No parent's going to want to bring their kid yelling, kicking, and screaming every time to the chiropractor. So you got to make it fun and engaging and exciting. So what we would recommend you do is put decals and put things that they can touch and play with at their level, things they can break, if you will, at their level. Do you have a pediatric adjusting table? Great question. Now, they're on the ICPA website. You can buy them all over. If you go on planetchiropractic.com or a lot of different Craigslist or whatever, they're great. But I will tell you this: if you don't have the room, dress up the table you have to make it a pediatric table. You could paint the base or build something underneath that doesn't obstruct you adjusting anyone on the table. But you could make your base of your table a cow or a dinosaur, Noah's Ark, a superhero. You can make it anything you want, and that'll just make it fun. Hey, let's go in the Superman room, So we name our rooms. We have a room number. So we have room adjusting table 1, right? And then that adjusting table 1 is BJ Palmer room. So we can refer to it as adjusting room 1, BJ Palmer room, or you can call it Superman room. You can call it a Spider-Man room. You can call it the Noah's Ark room. You can call it the dinosaur, the T-Rex room, whatever. But now all of a sudden, the bottom of that, you can interact with adults and help educate them towards chiropractic, but you can also engage and say to kids, hey, they're welcome. Maybe that child's not getting adjusted yet, which is a tragedy. Maybe they're not. We still have that in our office, unfortunately. But what happens is, they walk in and they get to see a zebra. They're going to want to get on the table. Hey, that looks fun. It looks like something I want to do. All the way around, each room has a theme to it. We've got the Batman room or Spider-Man room or Caveman room or Dinosaur room. So when you walk into those rooms, it's got a theme in each room so that the child, again, has fun. We went and bought those those toy units, which are wooden and they have all the little beads and so forth on them. I don't know the exact name for them, but and we bolted that on each and every room. We have 2 pediatric adjusting tables. We have a panda and a pig, and then they're in an aquarium. We got things hanging and things for them to play on, and we've got the a unit that explains the nerve impulse, the mental impulse on the wall, so I can go over there and explain to kids why they need to get adjusted. You know, we've got everything around that office that says to parents and to children, you're welcome. We love you. You mean something to us. We recognize you. We appreciate you. We want you here. You need to be here. You are so welcome. Your children are welcome all the time. And as a result, it just says, hey, listen, come on in and be part of this family, be part of this practice. And I'll tell you, just doing that alone would make dramatic changes in your practice. 2 more things here, we're wrapping out of time. 1, do you ask people about their birth? And I tell people during their first visit in the office, you know, this may seem like a silly question, Barbara, but in talking to your parents, did they ever explain to you or describe to you any information about when you were born? Was it a difficult birth? Do you know if forceps were used? Were you breech? Were you a twin? Do you know if you were a C-section? Do you know if you came out fast? Do you know if the labor was long? And I'm going to ask all kinds of questions because, listen, no labor is a great labor. I mean, most women, for the sake, unless you're a chiropractic, a woman that's grown up in chiropractic that trusts innate and that just has this beautiful experience upon birth, 99% of people aren't having that experience. So their birth is traumatized, they're under stress. Mom's been subluxated for 30 years. That's why she couldn't get pregnant most likely in the first place. And then when she does get pregnant, you know, based upon the subluxation, the toxic environment, and the fact that she's been so scared throughout her entire pregnancy, you know, she's subluxating the child, or the child's now developing subluxated. And we see that now with studies when they study the skeletals, the spinal alignment of babies. We see normal curves developing, and then we see normal alignment in many, and now we're starting to see later in the pregnancy, we see that the curves aren't there, or that the alignment starts to get out right before they're born. That's the subluxation of mom. Her innate isn't properly connected to the baby. The baby's put under a greater degree of stress. Therefore, what causes subluxation? Emotional stress. The baby's under emotional stress. The infant gets subluxated. I mean, we know this. So mom's subluxated, baby's subluxated, then they have a horrific birth. Most of them have a bad experience. And then what? Baby comes out bright light. We put them under even more trauma, more emotional stress, and then we're just causing more and more subluxation. So when you can start to ask mom or dad about their birth, and then I say, listen, we know through science that 80-90% of babies are subluxated, and that's a concern. That's significant because it's robbing them of a normal nerve function. Most people don't even know that. So Bob, I see you're 36 years old. You've never been adjusted before, so most likely you've been subluxated either from birth or early in life. And I see that you have, we always ask them on our sheet how many kids they have. You have 2 children. Have they been checked by a chiropractor? You know they're going to say no. You know they're going to say no. Geez, you know what? They haven't been checked. They've never been checked. They've never been under care. We know they're going to say that. We know it. And that's just, geez, that's a concern. You know, I think some of the times the challenges we run into is that the chiropractor, and again, I'm not trying to beat you up, but unless you feel as though it's a concern, and the more serious and significant that you feel that the care of their child is, or the need of care for their child, their need to be checked, how far are you willing to go in order to, and I'm not saying that means I'll do anything and give everybody care for free. I'll adjust children for free. I would tell you that would be the worst thing you could do. You'll never express value or significance or importance to that. They'll never value what you do. You'll just be some Uncle Dr. Bob who just, you know, all the kids, you know, he's fun and he lays them down and so forth. I mean, if you handle that moment as an honor and you handle that as something sacred, and you're like, wow, geez, you know, all these kids running around, they're not under care. Their neural network is not properly connected. The brain can't communicate to their body. That means their lung, their kidneys, their liver, their pancreas, the quality of their life, who they are as a human being is totally diminished of what it could be if they were properly connected. That's critical. And the research has shown that the effects of these subluxations or neurologic stress may not be seen for 50 to 60 years. And that's just from a disease standpoint, let alone who they are as a human being. It totally changes everything. And when you see it through those eyes, boy, it's really easy to have that conversation with people. And how far are you willing to go? In other words, just in your office, you don't have to be somebody that's going out lecturing all over the world. You don't have to be somebody that's lecturing in your community. That would be great, but you don't have to do that. The reality is, if you bring in 4 or 5 people in your practice, chances are every one of those people have some connection to another a child or to a child, and as a result, they have some influence over those people. And you want to create soldiers. So the better educated I am as a practice member, the better they'll be as far as explaining what the principle is in practice. So you got to talk about that. And then the last thing here, and I'm out of time, is the forceps. You go online. I mean, I've lectured all over the world at this point. Go on eBay, punch in obstetrical forceps, punch in. They're $40. Buy a baby model, have them in your practice. If you're a quiet personality, if you're not somebody like, that like me wants to yell and shout and get animated and so forth, that's just the way I am. But the reality is, you put a baby and you put forceps on there, they're going to ask you about it. They're going to say, what do you got a baby and forceps up there for? And you're going to say, well, geez, we're really concerned about the birth process. Well, I wasn't born with forceps. Well, did they use vacuum extractor on you? Was it, again, you can start getting into a conversation. Was it progressive? Mom said I came out quick. Well, let me ask you something. If I want to force a 10-pound baby to a small hole and the baby comes out quick, what am I doing? I'm pushing really hard. So what do you think's happening to the neck, into the shoulders? What do you think happened to the atlas, the occiput? What do you think happened there? What do you think happened if it was a long birth where I just kept banging and banging and banging up along the base of my skull? What do you think is going to happen there? What do you think is going to happen if I was breech presentation until the end? I'm horizontal transverse, hyperextended. I'm going to run into all kinds of problems. That child is subluxated. The more you educate yourself, the more you understand the science of the nervous system and understand the hardware that we all own and how important and delicate it is and how critical it is for all of those messages to flow to the body, to the degree that BJ and Dee Dee and Mabel and Stevenson and Sid and all these awesome people I love to put up on my wall, that they understand it at that level. Boy, when you understand it at that level, it's really easy to have the conversation in your practice. And the next thing you know, mom and dad go, geez, I better have Billy checked. Not because they have sciatica, not because they have ear problems, not because they have breathing problems, but because those children, I'm getting so excited, I'm spitting all over. Those children need to be under care. That's it. That's critical. We are having an event at my office May 3rd and 4th. Again, Dr. Shane Walker. We start at 5. We go to 9 o'clock on Friday nights, Philosophy Extravaganza. We're going to have a couple of speakers, including myself. On Saturday, we go from 8 until 6. All day, hardcore. And listen, this isn't one of these events that you go to and they try to, give you a few little things. But if you're not a client, they don't give you anything. That's not what I do. Guys, I'd love for you to be part of our program. I love to give it all to you. Here it is. This is what I do. This is how I do it. But without the accountability, without that factor of talking to me and how to implement it and what to implement and when to implement and so forth, it never really works very well. What happens? You go to an event 2 or 3 weeks later, you're practicing exactly the way you did. Maybe you got an idea of a bent pen. You start learning those procedures or protocols. You start diving into the philosophy that I teach you, diving into the science that I teach you, diving into the art that I bring to the table. And next thing you know, you couple that with accountability, being on the phone with me every week, not somebody else, on the phone with me every week. And you go to our in-office trainings. We train you in our office, and we train you 6 events throughout the year. Nobody, and I say this not out of arrogance, nobody has a better program than we do on delivering principled chiropractic procedures and protocols, along with accountability and coaching with somebody who's done it better than just about anybody in the history of our profession. How can you not succeed? Don't hesitate. Go to the website that's listed, sign up for May 3rd and 4th, be part of our program, at least come check us out. If we resonate with it and you love it, we'd love to have you part of our family. In the meantime, I love you for loving what we all love. May urinate always flow from above down, guys. And I look forward to seeing you on May 3rd and 4th. My office in Syracuse. Registration information, just click it down below. Have a great week serving. Can't wait to see you in May. Best friend gave me the best.